Welcome back to our video series regarding how to determine the level of a youngster's readiness and willingness to change his or her behavior pattern for the better, and how we can promote and support that positive transition. We'll continue on with the Transtheoretical model as it applies to our youngsters with emotional and behavioral challenges. Herein, we'll identify goals and strategies for each stage of the change process. We'll also talk too about the diagnostic prescriptive materials that allow you to assess the stage of readiness to change and provide you with strategies specific to that stage that will increase the youngster's willingness to cooperate with us in the pursuit of a new replacement behavior pattern. Periodically during the series, I'll be requesting that the session leader pause the podcast so that we can consider our thoughts regarding some questions and engage in vigorous discussion on the matter. Then, after your conversation is concluded, the session leader will restart the video. As we revisit the stages of readiness to change one's errant behavior pattern, here we see a bit more of the delineation of the stages of readiness and the preferred upward path that is illustrated by the short arrows between the stages. However, one can also stumble at any of the stages and tumble to a lower stage of willingness to adopt the new ways. Our kids might fall back one stage, or many, with resultant levels of motivation to work one's way back up, ranging from a demoralized nil to a highly motivated rededication. There is always the chance, too, of a massive pullback from the maintenance stage to the pre-contemplation stage and past aberrant practices. Then, too, at other times, the regression could be a thoughtful, conscious choice, as when someone in the action stage thinks, I need a break. I got to go back and prepare myself better for these situations that I'm facing. Or when someone in the preparation stage becomes uncertain about the choice. Session leader, at this point, please prepare to pause the podcast so that we can consider the question that's posed here. Why might two identical students differ in their interest in changing their ways? Or let's think about which influences would convince a youngster to stay with the present behavior pattern, or conversely, to undertake the process of change. Please pause the program now, restarting it when you find folks have gathered together your thoughts on the matter. Let's compare notes regarding the question. We may vary somewhat in our answers, but I suspect that we'll find ourselves to be in general agreement. First of all, does the youngster believe that he or she should be changing his or her ways? A big part of that is whether the youngster believes that the payoff, the benefits that accrue, will be greater than those that are gathered with the present behavioral pattern. In the third point, what does the youngster bring to the table, so to speak, in the way of skills and character traits? And when this youngster does decide that maybe I'll try to change my ways, does he or she like the interventions, the procedures, the techniques, and the strategies that we put into play? Does the youngster find them to be respectful, supportive, doable? And what baggage, what emotional baggage does the youngster bring to the table? Has the youngster tried to change before and met with failure? Does he or she have a belief in him or herself that change is possible? And then a large part of that is how trusting this youngster is with regards to us. Do they see us as a mentor who will be there when needed, providing the support as needed? And I suspect you folks have come up with some other influences and factors that need to be considered. If anything else came to mind, please indicate that to the session leader, who can pause the podcast once again. Otherwise, let's continue on. The stage at which we initially find many of our youth, to whom we refer to as being tough, streetwise, dangerous, unlawful, aggressive, manipulative, maladaptive, oppositional, defiant, conduct disordered, and so on, is the pre-contemplation phase. At present, they see no need to change their aberrant ways. Those action and reaction patterns are so ingrained, reinforced by people in their lives outside of our pro-social place, that they are defended with great fervor. These youngsters reject our pro-social code of values and conduct as strongly as we reject the adoption of theirs. Yep, there's that human nature thing again. We want to believe that we have figured out this complicated world, and often grasp onto standardized political, religious, or cultural views, wearing blinders that block out other views of the world, a phenomenon known as confirmation bias. I suspect you've already been thinking about this prompt here as to why these youngsters might be disinterested. Yeah, we had talked about, do the benefits that come from the new ways beat out the present benefits from the behavior pattern that's been shown now? And again, that to what degree have they been demoralized by a history of past failures? And then, what would be some of the characteristics of an individual who is in this stage at the moment? Well, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, the denial of a need to change his or her ways, being argumentative and defending those ways. We might refer to them as being uncooperative. And perhaps they feel incapable of change despite the desire to undertake that. I see what you're saying. I enjoy that you do believe in me. However, I don't think I could be successful. So how then do we spark an interest in changing when our attempts to confront this youngster's ways and values and arguments and convince them that their present action pattern is ineffective in helping them gain success in life? Yeah, their action profile is counterproductive and maladaptive to success in our mainstream society. So, given the strength of their resistance, how do we make an initial crack in that hardened defensive wall? Here's a rough sketch of our intervention attempts. First off, we validate. Our kids are products of, and unfortunately often victims of, the lives that they've experienced. They had no choice into which life they would be born. They are not to blame for their behavior. You may want to call up another one of my video series, the one on ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences, childhood trauma, and its physical and mental health effects on our children. Secondly, we encourage through non-accusatory questioning, readings, videos, modeling, and mentorship. We work to build curiosity about new and different ways of behaving. And we help by discussing what is valued and how the proposed new ways actually enhance the chances of obtaining those valuable objects and valued intra and interpersonal treasures. There's also one thing that we'll find reiterated through our leadership in helping youngsters move through the various stages. We let them know that it's up to them whether they want to engage in the new ways and engage in preparation for them or obtaining them. It's always up to the youngster whether he or she is ready to progress. You are to be complimented for having created a positive interpersonal bonding with your relationship resistant youngster. As someone who has made progress in building a relationship with this kid, you're going to find the time and the place to open up a discussion. These discussions can be scheduled or perhaps conducted during the latter stages of a cool down period after a high energy incident, whenever seems the appropriate time to engage the youth in conversation. We open up the conversation in a non-confrontational manner. Now is not the time for a rough reality rub. We wish to engage the youngster in a thoughtful conversation, perhaps after some small talk, a chat at the start, to enter into that conversation. Depending on the path of that conversation, variations on the questions that you see on your screen might plant the seed of contemplation for follow-up conversations. Another option, another possibility, is to use one of the discussion starting assessments from the assessment section of the Behavior Transformation Guide Kit. The numbers are areas in which the youngster, perhaps with our help, writes which things that particular person or group feels are valuable or important in life. Behavior change success stories from someone like yourself who's built a positive adult-child relationship can be highly motivational. I mean, it's human nature to want to please someone that we like, respect, and admire. It's also powerful to hear success stories from someone who went through the behavior transformation change process successfully. Does your facility have connections with someone who changed their behavior, similar to the actions of the youngster in question, for the better? Might that person be willing to talk with this kid who's at risk for poor life outcomes? On a side note, initial conversations are often best held over a bite to eat or while engaging in a favorite activity such as playing chess, shooting a basketball, playing catch, playing a board game, and so forth. These shared events strengthen relationships while addressing the pressing issues. Baking from scratch for the first time for that special person or occasion. Taking that scary ride at the amusement park, or walking a high ropes course. I recollect that some of my urban core kids were afraid to enter the wooded park of our field trip Conversely, I experience anxiety when deciding to walk through their neighborhoods. We all have our fears of the unknown, but with our behavioral focus, we are asking kids to face theirs not just for a singular event, like the ones that were mentioned, but for a significant lifestyle change. Maybe you have a struggle to share with them. Perhaps your story of persistent effort and success would provide an emotional trust bond, even if your situation seems to pale in comparison with theirs. In just a moment, we'll ask our session leader to pause the video, and at that time, please form into small groups of 3 to 5 colleagues. Share your experiences with each other. Then, the session leader will reconvene the whole group, asking for share-outs of stories that best reflect progress through the Transtheoretical model and its changes. So, as we look at the stages here, which life-changing task did you undertake? Why did you make that decision to undertake the arduous journey to a new you? How did you strengthen and embolden yourself in order to take those first steps? Were you successful in your first attempts? To what degree were you pleased with your early performance? Did you backslide? And which factors helped you to reach the maintenance stage? From where did your motivation to continue forward emanate? Your change is worthy of recognition. How long did it take you to reach your goal? How firmly planted are you in the new ways now? Is that change now cemented into place, or do the struggles still continue? Session leader, please pause the video at this point so that your gathering can engage in the small and the large group share-outs. The general practices listed here help to create an environment that plants and nurtures the seeds of change. The first point deals with the importance of building and maintaining positive interpersonal connections, relationships with our students or our clients. It's human nature to work to please individuals who we respect and admire. You gotta like the messenger if you're going to listen to the message. With regard to the second point on the screen, we tend to replay assigned roles when incidents present themselves on a regular basis. If you are unfamiliar with the 3 analyses that you see listed, you can find web pages and videos explaining them at behavioradvisor.com. And then you'll find additional strategies for moving the youngster from the pre-contemplation, no thanks, stinkin' thinkin' stage to the contemplation, considering change stage in the intervention section of the Behavior Transformation Guide. Regarding that last statement, let's take a look at the self-assessment instrument in the Diagnostic Prescriptive Behavior Transformation Guide package that's completed by the youngster. We have our young person complete it in order to determine the initial state of willingness to change his or her ways. We can then use it in later times in order to identify the level of enthusiasm for continuing on with the change process. Is it progressively increasing, or has it taken a hard hit when he or she relapsed to his or her former ways? No matter what the stage, we have tasks to accomplish in the best interests of the youngster for whom we want to see a positive future. Let's break it down into each stage and what we can and should do in order to move the student upward in the stage progression. We've already covered the pre-contemplation, not me, not now, stage, But let's say that you've established a positive interpersonal relationship with the youth, having been an admirable role model and sage mentor, and you've got the youngster thinking about how the ways accepted by school and society might be worth adopting. Because of your fine work, the young person is moved from the pre-contemplation to contemplation stage. The youngster is curious about a more pro-social action pattern. In the contemplation stage, we've created a crack in the resistance wall. There is still significant ambivalence about change, however. They're sitting on the fence, so to speak. Our focus is to help them weigh the pros and cons of switching out value systems and behavior patterns. We can support their decision to attempt change, or help them lean toward it by validating the authenticity of their life experiences and helping them to clarify their perceptions of the pros and the cons involved in conversion. Session leader, it's almost time to pause the video again, and during that pause, we'll talk with our nearby colleagues to devise questions we think we might ask of an apprehensive youngster. The question should get the kids to think more about their interest in behavior change. Each of our small groups should originate a couple of thoughtfully considered queries. I provided a couple to begin our long listing. Session leader, please pause the video in just a moment so that the gathered folks can consult with their fellow behavioral wizards regarding the question about questions. After we've had a few minutes to devise thought-provoking questions in small groups, please restart the video so that we can compare and contrast. Please pause the video now. Your small group had the time to develop a few brain activators for the kids entering into the contemplation stage. And in a moment, we'd like you to share out your small group's questions to the larger group. First, though, here you see a few thought provokers that might be of utility to you. How do your queries that you devised compare to these? I gather that your teams can offer up many more to add to this collection. So once again, session leader, please pause the video so that the small groups can share out their additional questions to our group as a whole. To reiterate the task, what are your thoughts regarding the questions on the screen, and which other questions can we add to this collection? Session leader, please pause the video at this point. When we talk about awareness or the cognitive ability level, we need to remember that there may be some groups of youngsters or just individual kids who are unable at present to engage in the complex reflection required to think through the process. For example, consider a learner with moderate to severe autism spectrum disorder, ASD. He or she, in this particular case, might display high rates of refusal, property destruction, aggression, and elopement, meaning running away from the adult or the classroom setting. The function of the behavior, its purpose, might be to escape demands or error correction, or perhaps the action is displayed in order to gain access to tangibles such as toys, or be able to engage in preferred personal routines such as voicing idiosyncratic scripting or arranging objects in the environment to be ordered in a specific anxiety-comforting manner. Because he is not cognizant of the maladaptive nature of his displays, their impact on others, and is unaware or unable to engage in more appropriate replacement behaviors, he won't be engaging in the level of reflective social thought necessary for full success in the contemplation stage as we imagine it with others. Students such as this young fellow are not able to fully understand or engage in the prescribed cognitive and affective components of contemplation. They will instead require behavioral teaching in order to go through the metamorphosis to another behavior response pattern. However, while these students might not be able to engage with this model in the traditional manner, some components still hold merit, especially with respect to those adults who are promoting change in the child. The caring adult is the one who needs to become aware that a change is necessary. That's contemplation. Gather information and devise a plan of intervention. That's the preparation phase. Undertake the plan in order to replace the present behavior. That's the action stage, using motivators that are meaningful to the youngster. The reinforcers are then faded over time and the program enhanced in ways that help to promote generalization of the new behavior to other settings and sustained use of the new actions instead of the maladaptive ones. That's the maintenance phase. While we have here an incredibly valuable model for individuals who understand the multifaceted factors contributing to and influencing their behavior, many of our students who do not yet possess these skills, for them, an applied behavior analysis approach may be required. Certainly the questions that we devise for use will lead the way, but to operationalize things a bit more, let's back up the bus and talk more extensively about our approach for kids who are operating at present in the pre-contemplation stage. Both of the structured analyses, the ABC analysis and the mistaken goal analysis, can be found on behavioradvisor.com, as can the steps for conducting a problem-solving meeting. Once you're at Behavior Advisor, spelled devoid of the letter U that's used in most of our English-speaking countries, click on the Intervention Strategies tab. That's where you'll find this material. We can also make use of a visual image of the stages of the Transtheoretical model of behavior change to inform the youngster regarding how change comes about and the inherent risks involved in making those attempts to change. With their cooperation, we can then sketch out a plan of action for positive behavior change. Here are some general guidelines for working with kids who have situated themselves in the contemplation stage. Provide a quick acknowledgement that you recognize that the youth is not yet ready to engage in the preparation part of the process. In number 2, we convey to the young person that it's his or her decision as to if and when and in which manner he or she will move forward. We strike up conversations on the matter, but our role is one of asking innocent questions that motivate the youngster to continue thinking about possible change. Even our suggestions can be phrased as questions. For example, would better grades and fewer phone calls home be a desirable outcome? And why would anyone like yourself want to change his ways? Can you give me just one reason? And so what exactly keeps you from jumping on the wagon and riding it with me toward those goals? Of course, you'll use your own personal style of phrasing that's developmentally appropriate for the child or the adolescent. In number 4, it's important that our mentee be dealing with reality. Certainly views of what constitutes reality are different, and some professor once described reality as a commonly accepted illusion. But we do want to clear up any stinkin' thinking, such as, nobody cares about me, all the teachers hate me, and so forth. I concur that some folks find some kids difficult to like, but they are products of, or perhaps victims of, the life into which they were born. No child would choose to be disliked or punitively disciplined. We can dislike their responses, but we must separate those irritants from the children and youth behind them. Be willing to work with them in a tolerant and compassionate manner so that they can develop less behaviorally odious actions. With your passion for helping kids improve themselves, your heartening and inspiring emboldening, the young understudy will venture closer to making that positive decision to engage in change. And in number 6, well, I'm not telling you to do anything different than what you do by personal and professional instinct. Let it be known that you're available if and when he or she is psychologically prepared to move forward. Here you'll see how we might verbalize our way through this accepting and respectful approach. Certainly change the wording into the caring and compassionate phrasing that you typically use. Again, you'll want to be certain that you're authentic and individual in your approach. Ensure that your phrasing is developmentally appropriate for the young one. Just be the best that you can be. Tolerant, accepting, patient, supportive, empathetic, caring, and concerned. Oh, before we leave this slide, note the word yet in item number 1. We do want to convey that progress will happen. In our discussions, we can use a graphic such as this one to list the pros and cons of remaining in the present stage or moving toward pro-social change. We would address the quadrants in the indicated order, beginning with the payoffs that accrue from the demonstration of the present response patterns. We then attempt to get the youngster to poke holes in the pros by engaging him or her in the identification of various cons or drawbacks. We'll move then into how changing one's ways, well, it has its hazards too, but how, after all is considered, the advantages of change outweigh the advantages of remaining in place. Please keep in mind, however, that those advantages must outweigh those of maintaining the present ways. Otherwise, why would he or she decide to move forward? Few individuals on this granite planet are enthusiastic about engaging in harder work for less payoff. And if we wish to do so, we can guide the process a bit more with one of our many assessment instruments from my Behavior Transformation Guide. Here's the first page of the Thinking About Things Thought Clarification tool. The instrument is designed to involve the young one in a more reflective consideration of the issues involved. Here you see the second page of that instrument that is geared toward stimulating, organizing, and clarifying the youngster's thoughts during the contemplation stage. As we continue with the steps in the general approach for this stage, we encourage continued reflection outside of our meeting. We might ask the young one to engage in some self-reflective homework and talk with trusted individuals. We complete the process by reiterating that the choice to undertake change is up to him or her, but we are available to mentor and support if he or she should decide to continue to pursue investigation into progressive change. We'll continue on with the trans-theoretical model of change as it applies to our young people with emotional and behavioral challenges in the upcoming third segment of this video series. Therein, we'll identify goals and strategies for the action and maintenance stages of the transition process. We'll talk too about the diagnostic prescriptive materials that allow you to assess the stage of readiness to change and provide you with strategies that are specific to that particular stage that increase the youngster's willingness to cooperate with us in pursuit of a new replacement behavior regimen. You can find out more about these materials at the link at the top of your screen. As we near the end point for this segment, let's have our session moderator indicate the length of a short break while part 3 is being queued up. Thank you for your professionalism as you return at the appointed time. Session leader, you're up.